Look, I've been fascinated by dangerous animals my whole life, but when I started researching Australia's prehistoric past, honestly, I had to take a break. Because here's the thing, modern Australia, with all its deadly spiders and venomous snakes, is basically a petting zoo compared to what it used to be. We're talking about a continent that housed more species capable of killing you than anywhere else on Earth, and that's just the stuff that's alive today. But here's what really gets me. Australia is home to 20 of the world's 25 deadliest snakes, including every single one of the top 11. Plus, it's got the cassowary, which is literally one of the few birds that will straight up murder you if you annoy it. And don't even get me started on the saltwater crocs, great whites, and those jellyfish that can stop your heart. I mean, this place even has pine cones that can kill you, pine cones. The 3 largest wildfires of this century? Yeah, all happened here. But here's where it gets absolutely wild. All of this modern nightmare fuel is actually the toned-down version of what Australia used to be. I'm not talking about the age of dinosaurs either. I'm talking about just 50,000 years ago, right when humans first showed up. Talk about terrible timing, right? Back then, reptiles, not mammals, were running the show. And if you thought today's Australia was bad, imagine stepping off a boat and immediately realizing that something was seriously wrong with this place. Because wandering around the landscape was something that still gives me chills when I think about it. A genuine crocodile that had learned to run on land. This beast was called the Quinkana, and it was basically evolution's cruel joke on anyone trying to survive in Australia. Now initially, scientists thought this was just another crocodile species, but when they looked closer at its skull structure, they realized it belonged to an entirely extinct group called Megalania. And those legs? Completely wrong for a normal crocodile. They were long, built for keeping its body off the ground, and potentially for sprinting after prey. Here's what makes this even more terrifying. The Quinkana wasn't some small, manageable predator. Most adults stretched 10 feet long and weighed 440 pounds, making them about the same weight as a medium American alligator. But some individuals? They reached 20 feet in length. At that size, taking down a human wasn't just possible, it was probably routine. And the way it killed you? Absolute nightmare fuel. Each tooth was like a serrated blade, designed to slice through flesh like you were made of butter. Scientists call these zyphodont teeth, the same type that theropod dinosaurs had. Every bite would tear away massive chunks of muscle and flesh, and here's the kicker, you couldn't even escape by jumping in water, because evidence suggests these land crocs were accomplished swimmers too. But wait, it gets worse. Even a terrestrial crocodile with dinosaur teeth wasn't safe from other Australian creatures, because also roaming around was the largest known terrestrial lizard ever, Megalania. Actually, its official name is now Varanus priscus, meaning it was essentially a giant monitor lizard, but most people still call it Megalania because that translates to great roamer, which is honestly perfect for something this massive. Now, paleontologists can never agree on exact measurements, but every estimate puts this thing at least 11 feet long, weighing around 348 pounds. So at minimum, we're talking about a lizard as long as a sea lion and as heavy as a reindeer. But at maximum size estimates, things get absolutely insane. Some studies suggest they could reach 26 feet in length, making them as long as the longest recorded anaconda, but 8.5 times heavier due to their robust build. We're talking about a potential maximum weight of 2 tons. And just like modern monitor lizards, Megalania had razor-sharp recurved teeth that provided extra grip while holding onto prey. Plus, it used tremendously powerful legs and sharp claws to bring down anything it wanted. Oh, and in true Australian fashion, it might have been venomous too, because all living monitor lizards are considered venomous. Their venom works as an anticoagulant, preventing blood from clotting, which leads to shock and infections as wounds stay open longer. Since the Komodo dragon is Megalania's closest living relative, some paleontologists think they shared similar hunting tactics. bite the prey, retreat, and let the venom do the work. So even if you managed to escape an attacking Megalania, you'd still be doomed. But maybe you're afraid of snakes instead? Well, then your worst nightmare would have been Wonambi. This name might not sound intimidating, but it belonged to an extinct giant serpent that lived alongside both the Quinkana and Megalania. This snake was unlike anything we know today, belonging to a family called the marsupial, characterized by somewhat inflexible primitive jaws and massive sizes. The Wonambi came awfully close to matching today's longest snakes, with larger specimens reaching 20 feet, equivalent to a large Burmese python. Fortunately, it broke the Australian trend of being venomous, but its size still made it a potent killer, hunting similarly to modern constrictor snakes. It would ambush prey near water, strike, then squeeze so hard that blood couldn't reach the victim's brain or heart. But here's where it gets really nightmarish. The Wonambi had an inflexible, smaller head that couldn't swallow prey whole. So instead, it would use its sharp teeth and powerful body to tear chunks off prey, sometimes even disemboweling them while they were still alive. One study found that in some indigenous populations today, snake attacks by constrictors are still a common cause of death. By now, you're probably wondering how any mammal survived with all these reptilian horrors around. Well, the answer is simple. The mammals were just as crazy. The best example is the Thylacoleo, adults of which were the largest known mammalian predators to ever live in Australia. On average, they were about the size of a European wild boar, while the largest were comparable to fully matured female lions and tigers. But here's the wild part. This wasn't a feline at all. The Thylacoleo was actually a marsupial, most closely related to the koala. And like koalas, it's thought to have had a smaller brain. But in this case, that was a huge advantage, because it gave the skull more space for extremely dense muscles and wide, sturdy bones. This ultimately led to the strongest bite pound for pound of any known mammal. A medium-sized Thylacoleo could bite with the same force as a lion 2.5 times its size, leading paleontologists to suspect it could take down prey 15 times heavier than itself. And it did so with bizarre dentition, large incisors similar to elongated canines, plus giant premolars that almost resembled flat blades. Together with its powerful muscles, these teeth would pierce deep into flesh with the incisors while the premolars severed the windpipe, spinal cord, and arteries. This killing method was so efficient that researchers think it took less than a minute to kill large prey, while the same task for an African lion can take 15 minutes or more. And if the bite didn't work, the Thylacoleo had lethal claws too. Each front foot had a single large retractable claw attached to semi-opposable thumbs, implying it could move these claws with ease and dish out killing blows if needed. These hooked weapons also suggest it was a climber, possibly dragging kills up trees like leopards do. So with all these terrifying predators around, you'd think maybe you could find peace around the herbivores, right? Wrong. The plant eaters had gotten pretty ferocious themselves in response to all these biological killing machines. Take the Diprotodon, an extinct marsupial whose closest living relative is the wombat. They looked somewhat similar, except the Diprotodon was massive, potentially weighing up to 3.85 tons, equal to a fully grown Asian elephant. This size gave it much-needed durability, and hunting it would have been questionable at best, especially considering its surprisingly strong bite. Despite being strictly vegetarian, it still had a nasty bite that reached 11,000 newtons in force, giving it more than enough power to break a human's femur. Even the birds were supersized. The Genyornis resembled the once widespread terror birds, but actually belonged to a separate family called Dromornithidae, or thunderbirds. Despite their menacing appearances, they were believed to be herbivores, but they still had size to help balance their defenses. The average Genyornis stood 6.5 feet tall and weighed a full quarter of a ton. If size wasn't enough of a deterrent, it could always use its beak or sharp claws to ward off predators. By now, it should be crystal clear that ancient Australia was the absolute last place you'd want to visit. And just to really drive it home, Remember that nearly every dangerous animal in Australia today was also still around back then, not to mention other extinct creatures like large turtles and additional crocodilians. Nature itself was harsh, with extreme droughts being common. And yet, despite all these impossible odds, humans still survived in Australia. In fact, not only did they survive, but they managed to thrive and dominate the landscape, with evidence showing they preyed upon multiple of the megafauna I've mentioned today. Which makes you wonder, maybe we were actually the scariest animals around during those times.